And I'll make that Tom. Oh. Hello everyone. First of all, let me apologise if anything's a little bit different than that. Lamp has apparently done another major update of all the wards. So that there's, what is it? I don't know what he said exactly, but apparently the way you should be seeing things will be slightly different, so you might notice some differences. He said it was something about integrating the spectral, a spectral something or other with, I don't know. This stuff goes over my head if I'm honest. Basically, the way he made it so you could see when spirits are possessing me before, he made it so that or something about that was wrong, and so it wasn't working properly with the the rest of the way things was going, and so now you should be able to see that and also see things normally, and the walls shouldn't break as much, and yeah, all that should work basically. Right, so yeah, today we've got some books today. Today we've got some books today. We've got more books, or more short stories today. We've got another couple here by Fitzgerald. We've got The Lost Decade and A Cut Glass Bowl. And we also got some books by Mark Twain. Here we are. We got The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, Journals of Germany, and about Barbers. Now all of these is pretty short, with the exception of A Cut Glass Bowl, which is reasonably long. The rest of them is all, I think, 10 pages or less though, so it shouldn't be super long for them. Cut Glass Bowl's 30-ish, I think, thereabouts. So, we'll see how we get on. I don't expect things to be going too much longer than 2 hours tonight though, if that. So yeah, reasonably light. Lamp has had me running about all day doing the wards, so I just grabbed a couple of books from the scene I've been in a minute. But yeah, as always, for anyone who hasn't seen this before, my name's SkitterSkreetch, you can call me Skitter. What else? And of course, if at any point anyone has comments they need me to go over something again, haven't understood something, they want to say something, they can feel free, and I will be pausing probably the end of most of these. I might stop about halfway through the cut glass bowl, have a drink of water, and do a little bit of commentary about what's going on. But yeah, other than that, I think we're good. So yeah, unless anyone has anything to say, or there's some problem you want to let me know about, I'll get started. So, a cut glass bowl. Oh, there's a little one at the start of this, and this one might actually have little chapters in it, so if that's the case then we'll stop there instead of halfway through. So, the cut glass bowl. 1. There was a rough stone age and a smooth stone age, and a bronze age, and many years afterwards a cut glass age. In the cut glass age, when young ladies had persuaded young men to marry, in the cut glass age, when young ladies had persuaded young men with long curly moustaches to marry them, they sat down several months afterwards and wrote thank you notes for all sorts of cut glass presents. Punch bowls, finger bowls, dinner glasses, wine glasses, ice cream dishes, bonbon dishes, decanters and cases. For, though cut glass were not new in the 90s, it was then especially busy reflecting the dazzling light of fashion from the Bet Bay to the fastness of the Middle West. After the wedding, the punch bowls were arranged on the sideboard with a big bowl in the centre, the glasses were set up in the china closet, the candlesticks were put at both ends of the things, and then the last struggle through existence began. The bonbon dish lost its little handle and became a pin tray upstairs. A promenading cat knocked the little bowl off the sideboard, and the art girl chipped the middle-sized one with a sugar dish. Then the wine glasses succumbed to leg fractures, and even the dinner glasses disappeared one by one, like the 10 little niggers. The last one ended up scarred and maimed as a toothbrush holder among other shabby genteel on the bathroom shelf. By the time all this had happened, the cut glass age were over anyway. It was well past its first glory, and the day the curious Mrs. Roger Fairbout came to see the beautiful Mrs. Harold Piper. "My dear," said the curious Mrs. Roger Fairbout, "I love your house. I think it's quite artistic." "I am so glad," said the beautiful Mrs. Harold Piper, lights appearing in her young dark eyes. "And you must come more often. I'm almost always alone in the afternoon." Mrs. Fairbolt would have liked to have remarked that she didn't believe all this at all, and couldn't see how she'd be expected to. It were all over town that Mr. Freddie Gedney had been dropping in on Miss Piper 5 afternoons a week for the past 6 months. Mrs. Fairbolt was at that ripe age where she distrusted all beautiful women. "I love the dining room most," she said, "and all that marvellous china, and the huge cut-glass bowl." Mrs. Piper laughed so prettily that Mrs. Fairbolt's lingering reservations about the Freddie Gedney story quite vanished. "Oh, that big bowl," Miss Piper's mouth forming the word was a vivid rose petal. "There's a story about that bowl." You remember young Charlton Candy? Well, I told him he was very attentive at one time, and the night I told him I was going to marry Harold 7 years ago in '92, he drew himself way up and said, "Evelyn, I'm going to give a present that's as hard as you are beautiful, and as empty and as easy to see through." He frightened me a little. His eyes were so black I thought he was going to leave me a haunted house or something that would explode when you opened it. That bowl came, and of course it's beautiful. Its diameter or circumference or something is 2.5 feet, or perhaps 3.5. Anyway, the sideboard is really too small for it. It sticks way out. My dear, wasn't that odd? And he left town about that, didn't he? Mrs. Fairbolt was scribbling italicized notes on her memory. "Oh, beautiful, empty and easy to see through." "Yes, he went west or south or somewhere," answered Mrs. Piper, radiant in the divine vagueness that helps to lift beauty out of time. Mrs. Fairbolt drew on her gloves, approving the effect de largesse given by the open sweep from a spacious music room through the library, disclosing a part of the dining room beyond. It was really the nicest smaller house in town, and Miss Piper had talked of moving to a larger one on Devereux Avenue. Harold Piper must be coining money. As she turned to the sidewalk under the gathering autumn dusk, she assumed that disapproving, faintly unpleasant expression that almost all successful women of 40 wear on a street. If I were Harold Piper, she thought, I'd spend a little less time on business and a little more time at home. Some friend should speak to him. If Mrs. Fairbolt had considered it a successful afternoon, she would have named it a triumph, and she waited 2 months longer. But while she was still at the black receding figure 100 yards down the street, a very good-looking, distraught young man turned up the walk of the Piper house. Mrs. Piper answered the doorbell herself, and with a rather dismayed expression led him quickly into the library. "I had to see you," he began mildly. "Your note played the devil with me. Did Harold frighten you into this?" She shook her head. "I'm through, Fred," she said slowly, her lips had never looked to him so much like tearings from a rose. "He came home last night sick with it. Jessie Piper's sense of duty was too much for her, so she went down to his office and told him. He was hardened. Oh, I can't help seeing it his way, Fred. He says that we've been Cub Blossom all summer, and he didn't know it, and now he understands snatches of conversation he's caught and veiled hints people have dropped about me. He's mighty angry, Fred, and he loves me, and I love him, rather." Gedney nodded slowly, and half closed his eyes. "Yes," I said, "yes, my trouble's like yours. I can see other people's point of view too plainly." His grey eyes met her dark ones frankly. "The blessed thing's over. My God, Evelyn, I've been sitting down at the office all day looking at the outside of your letter, and looking at it and looking at it. You've got to go, Fred," she said steadily, and the slight emphasis of a hurry in her voice for a new thrust for him. "I've given my word of honour I wouldn't see you. I know just how far I can go with Harold, and being here with you this evening is one of the things I can't do." They were still standing there, and as she spoke she made a little movement towards the door. Gedney looked up at her miserably, drawing near at the end to treasure up the last picture of her, and then suddenly both of them were stiffened into marble at the sound of steps on the walk outside. Instantly her arm reached out, grasping the lapel of his coat. Half urged, half swung him through the big door into the dark dining room. "I'll make him go upstairs," she whispered close to his ear. "Don't move till you hear her on the stairs, then go out the front way." Then they were alone, listening as she greeted her husband in the hall. Harold Piper was 36, 9 years older than his wife. He was handsome, with marginal notes, these being eyes that were too close together, and a certain woodenness when his face were in repose. His attitude towards this Gedney matter was typical of all his attitudes. He had told Evelyn that he considered the subject closed and would never reproach her nor allude to it in any form, and he told himself that this was rather a big way of looking at it, that she were not a little impressed. Yet, like all men who were preoccupied with their own broadness, he was exceptionally narrow. He greeted Evelyn with emphasised cordiality this evening. "You'll have to hurry and dress, Harold," she said eagerly. "We're going to the Bronsons." He nodded. "It doesn't take me long to dress, dear." And his words trailing off, he walked out on into the library. Evelyn's aunt chattered loudly. "Harold," she began with a little catch in her voice, and followed him in. "You were lighting a cigarette." "You have to hurry, Harold," she finished, standing in the doorway. "Why?" he asked, a trifle impatiently. "You're not dressed yourself yet, Evie?" He stretched out on a Morris chair and unfolded a newspaper. With a sinking sensation, Evelyn saw that this meant at least 10 minutes, and Gedney was standing breathless in the next room. Supposing Harold decided that before he went upstairs he wanted a drink from the decanter on the sideboard. Then it occurred to her to forestall this contingency by bringing him the decanter and a glass. She dreaded calling his attention to the dining room in any way, but she couldn't risk the other chance. At the same moment, Harold rose, throwing his paper down, and came towards her. "Avie, dear," he said, bending down and putting his arms about her. "I hope you're not thinking about last night." She moved close to him, trembling. "I know," he continued. "It was just an imprudent friendship on your part. We all make mistakes." Evelyn hardly heard him. She was wondering if by sheer clinging to him she could draw him out and up the stairs. She thought of playing sick, asking to be carried up. Unfortunately, she knew he would lay her on the couch and bring her whiskey. Suddenly her nervous tension moved up at last impossible notch. She had heard a very faint but quite unmistakable creak from the floor of the dining room. Fred was trying to get out the back way. Then her heart took a flying leap as an hollow ringing note like a gong echoed and re-echoed through the house. Gedney's arm had struck the big cut glass bowl. "What's that?" cried Harold. "Who's there?" She clung to him, but he broke away, and the room seemed to crash about her ears. She heard the pantry door swing open, a scuffle, then her out led a tin pan, and in wild despair she rushed into the kitchen and pulled up the gas. Her husband's arm slowly unwound from Gedney's neck, and he stood there very still, first in amazement, then with a pain dawning in his face. "My golly," he said unbelievably, and then repeated, "My golly." He turned as if to jump again at Gedney, stopped, his muscles visibly relaxed, and he gave a bitter little laugh. You people. Evelyn's arms were around him and her eyes were pleading with him frantically. He pushed her away and sank into a kitchen chair, his face like porcelain. "You've been doing things to me, Evelyn. Why, you little devil, you little devil!" She'd never felt so sorry for him. She'd never loved him so much. "It wasn't her fault," said Gedney rather humbly. "I just came." The piper shook his head, and his expression when he stared up was as if some physical accident had jarred his mind to a temporary inability to function. His eyes, grown suddenly pitiful, struck a deep, unsounded chord in Evelyn, and simultaneously a furious anger surged in her. She felt her eyelids burning. She stamped her foot violently, her hands scurried nervously over the table as if searching for a weapon. Then she flung herself wildly at Gedney. "Get out!" she screamed, dark eyes blazing, little fist beating helplessly on his outstretched arm. "You did this! Get out of here! Get out! Get out! Get out!" That's the end of chapter 1. I have a little sip of water. So it seems there's been some carrying on going on. Oh, I forgot to do something at the start. This law. I should have done this earlier, but I meant to say at the start of the stream, as I always do, thank you very much to Discipline who followed me in between streams. I tend to do that at the start, but I completely overlooked it because of the I just got to update the awards. Sorry about that. But yeah, what was I saying? Like I said, some carrying on been going on. Seems like for some time, and as often happens, you know, people come to do things the right way, cut things off proper, but you do want the last word, and of course, everything goes terribly wrong because, I mean, there's only really one, assumption could be made when the partner of your partner's affair is found in the ardent room, yeah? No matter how, I suppose, polite or innocent, I suppose, the true story may be. Innocent, maybe not innocent, I don't know. You know how it goes. But yeah. We'll press on. Chapter 2. Concerning Mrs. Harold Piper at 35, opinion were divided. Women said she was still handsome, men said she was pretty no longer. And this was probably because the qualities in her beauty that women had feared and men had followed had vanished. Her eyes were still large and dark and sad, but the mystery had departed. Their sadness were no longer eternal, only human, and she developed an habit, when she was startled or annoyed, to twitch her brows together and blinking several times. Her mouth also had lost. Her head had receded, and the faint downturn of its corners when she smiled, that had added to the sadness of the eyes, had been vaguely mocking and beautiful, were quite gone. When she smiled now, the corners of her lips turned up. Back in the day, when she revelled in her own beauty, Evelyn had enjoyed that smile of hers. She had accentuated it. When she stopped accentuating it, it faded out, It faded out, and the last of her mystery with her. Evelyn had ceased accentuating her smile within a month after the Freddie Gedney affair. Externally, things had gone on very much as they had before. In those few minutes during which she had discovered how much she loved her husband, Evelyn had realised how indelibly she hurt him. For a month she struggled against aching silences, wild reproaches and accusations. She pled with him, made quiet, pitiful little love to him, and he laughed at her bitterly. And then she too slipped gradually into silence, and a shadowy, impenetrable barrier dropped between them. The surge of love that had risen in her, she lavished on Donald, her little boy, realising him almost wonderingly as a part of her life. The next year, a piling up of mutual interests and responsibilities and some stray flicker from the past brought husband and wife together again. But after a rather pathetic flood of passion, Evelyn realised that her great opportunity was gone. There simply wasn't anything left. She might have been youth and love for both, but at that time of silence had slowly dried up the springs of affection, and her own desire to drink again of them were dead. She began for the first time to seek women friends, and preferred books she had read before, and so little where she could watch her 2 children to whom she was devoted. She worried about little things. If she saw crumbs on the dinner table, her mind drifted off the conversation. She was receding gradually into middle age. Her 35th birthday had been an exceptionally busy one. They were entertaining on short notice that night, and as she stood in her bedroom window in the late afternoon, she discovered that she was quite tired. 10 years before, she would have laid down and slept, but now she had a feeling that things needed a watching. Maids were cleaning downstairs, bric-a-brac were all over the floor, and there were sure to be grocery men that had to be talked to imperatively. And then there were a letter to write to Donald, who was 14 and his first year away at school. She had nearly decided to lie down nevertheless when she heard a sudden familiar signal from little Julie downstairs. She compressed her lips, her brows twitched together, and she blushed. "Julie," she called. "Ow," prolonged Julie plaintively, and the voice of Hilda, the second maid, floated up the stairs. "She cut herself a little, Miss Piper." Evelyn flew to her sewing basket, rummaged until she found a torn handkerchief, and hurried downstairs. In a moment, Julie was crying in her arms as she searched for the cut. Faint, disparaging evidences of which appeared on Julie's dress. "My thumb," explained Julie. "Oh, it hurts." "It was a bowl. Here, this one," said Hilda apologetically. "It was just waiting on the floor while I polished the sideboard, and Julie come along and went to fooling with it. She just scratched herself." Evelyn frowned heavily at Hilda, and twisted Julie decisively in her act, began tearing strips off of the handkerchief. "Now, let's see it, dear." Julie held up her hand, and Evelyn pounced. "There." Julie surveyed her swashed thumb doubtfully. She crooked it and waggled. A pleased, interested look appeared in her tear-stained face. She sniffed and waggled it again. "You precious!" cried Evelyn and kissed her. But before she left the room, she levelled another frown at Hilda. Careless. Servants all that way nowadays. If she could get a good Irish woman, you couldn't any more in these Swedes. At 5 o'clock, Harold arrived, and coming up to her room, threatened in a suspiciously jovial tone to kiss her 35 times for her birthday. Evelyn resisted. "You've been drinking," she said shortly, and then added qualitatively, "A little. You know I love the smell of it." "Evie," he said after a pause, seating himself in a chair by the window, "I can tell you something now. I guess you've known things haven't been going quite right downtown." She was standing at the window, combing her hair. At these words, she turned and looked at him. "How do you mean? You always said there was room for more than one wholesale hardware house in town?" The voice expressed some alarm. "There was," said Harold significantly. "This Clarence Aaron is a smart man." I was surprised when he said he was coming to dinner. "Evie," he went on with another slap at his knee, "after January 1st, the Clarence Aaron Company becomes the Aaron Piper Company, and Piper Brothers as a company ceases to exist." Evelyn was startled. The sound of his name in second place was somehow hostile to her. Still he appeared jubilant. "I don't understand, Harold." "Well, Evie, I aim with his fooling around with Marks. If those two had combined, would have been the little fellow struggling along, picking up smaller orders, handling back on risks. It's a question of capital, Evie. And Aram and Marks would have had this business like Aaron and Piper is going in now." He paused and coughed a little cloud of whiskey floated up to her nostrils. "Tell you the truth, Evie, I've suspected that Aram's wife had something to do with it. Ambitious little lady, I'm told. Guess she knew the Markses couldn't help her much here." "Is she common?" asked Evie. "No matter, I'm sure. I don't doubt it. Clarence Aram's name's been up in the country club for 5 months. No action taken." He waved his hands disparagingly. "Harold and I had lunch together today and just about clinched it, so I thought it'd be nice to have him and his wife up tonight. Just have 9, mostly family. After all, it's a big thing for me, and of course we'll have to see something to them, Evie." "Yes," said Evie thoughtfully. "I suppose we will." Evelyn was not disturbed over the social end of it. The idea of Piper Brothers becoming the Aaron Piper Company startled her. It seemed like going down in the world. " 1/2 an hour later, she began to dress for dinner. She heard his voice from downstairs. Oh, Evie, come down. She went out into the hall and called over the banister. What is it? I want you to help me make some of that punch before dinner. Hardly rehooking her dress, she descended the stairs and found him grouping the essentials on the dining room table. She went to the sideboard and, lifting one of the bowls, carried it over. Oh, no, he protested. Let's use the big one. There'll be her and his wife, and you and I and Milton. That's 5, and Tom and Jessie, that's 7. Your sister and Joe Ambler, that's 9. You know how quick the stuff goes when you make it. I'll use this bowl, she insisted. It'll hold plenty. You know how it is. You know how Tom is. Tom Lowry, husband to Jessie, Harold's first cousin, were rather inclined to finish anything in the liquid way that you began. Harold shook his head. Don't be foolish. That one only holds about 3 quarts, and there's 9 of us, and the servants will want some. It is a very strong punch. It's so much more cheerful to have a lot, Evie. We don't have to drink all of it. I say the small one. Again, he shook his head obstinately. No, be reasonable. I am reasonable, she said shortly. I don't want any drunken men in the house. You said you did, and used a small bowl. Now, Evie. He grasped the smaller bowl and lifted it back. Instantly her hands were on it, holding it down. There was a momentary struggle, and then, with a little exasperated grunt, he raised his side, slipped it from her fingers, and carried it to the sideboard. She looked at him and tried to make her expression contemptuous, but he only laughed. Acknowledging her defeat, but disclaiming all future interest in the punch, she left the room. That's the end of chapter 2. Well, things have rather taken a turn. That's not an entirely pleasant sort of change to their relationship. It's quite a cruel way to describe the coming on of middle age. But then I suppose it's the, I don't know, the sort of domestic standard middle age of the 1920s and 30s. A time fast. Still, grim. Grim enough indeed. Right then. I'm trying to think what else there is. I mean, she's lashing out obviously at her servants a little unfairly. And their relationship is pretty badly broken. And it's odd really. I mean, on the surface of it, it's pretty clearly her fault, but there's a pretty solid sense that it's both of theirs faults to a certain degree, and admittedly, after what an ass he made of himself, I'm not so big a fan of her husband there, so not going to offend him too much. Yeah, I think that's about all of it, so let's press on. Chapter 3. At 7:30, her cheeks glow and her eyes piled. Struggling the day, Lord. At 7:30, her cheeks glow and her half-piled hair gleam with a suspicion of brilliantine. Evelyn descended the stairs. Mrs. Aaron, a little woman, concealing a slight nervousness under her red hair and the Stream Empire gown, greeted her volubly. Evelyn disliked her on the spot, but the husband she rather approved of. He had keen blue eyes and a natural gift of pleasing people that might have made him socially, had he not so obviously committed the blunder of marrying too early in his career. I'm glad to know Miss Piper's wife, he said simply. It looks as though your husband and I are going to see a lot of each other in the future. She bowed, smiled graciously, and turned to greet the other. Milton Piper, Harold's quiet, unassertive younger brother, the 2 Lowrys, Jessie and Tom, Irene, her own unmarried sister, and finally Joe Ambler, a confirmed bachelor and Irene's perennial beau. Harold led the way into dinner. We're having a punch evening, he announced, jovially. Evelyn sure that he had already sampled his concoction. There won't be any cocktails except the punch. It's my wife's greatest achievement, Mrs. Aaron. She'll give you the recipe if you want it, but owing to a slight, got his wife's eye on board. To a slight indisposition, I'm responsible for this batch. Here's how. All through dinner there were punch, and Evelyn, noticing that Aaron and Milton Piper and all the women were shaking their heads negatively at the maid, knew she'd been right about the bowl. It was still half full. She resolved to caution Howard directly afterwards, but when the women left the table, Mrs. Aaron cornered her, and she found herself talking cities and dressmakers with a polite show of interest. We've moved around a lot, chatted Miss Aaron, her red hair nodding volubly. Oh yes, we've never stayed so long in a town before, but I do hope we're here for good. I like it here, don't you? Well, you see, I've always lived here, so naturally. Oh, that's true, said Miss Aaron, and laughed. Clarence always used to tell me he had to have a wife before he could... A wife who could come home to and say, well, we're going to Chicago tomorrow to live, so pack up. I got so I never expected to live anywhere. She laughed a little laugh again. Evelyn suspected it was a society laugh. Your husband is a very able man, I imagine? Oh, yes, Miss Aaron assured her eagerly. He's brainy, Clarence, ideas and enthusiasm, you know, finds out what he wants and then goes and gets them. Evelyn nodded. She was wondering if the men were still drinking punch back in the dining room. Miss Erin's history kept unfolding, jerkily, but Evelyn had ceased to listen. The first odour of mass cigars began to drift in. It wasn't really a large house, she reflected. On an evening like this, the library sometimes grew blue with smoke, and the next day one had to leave the windows open for hours to air the heavy staleness out of the curtains. Perhaps this partnership marked. She began to speculate on a new house. Mrs. Erin's voice drifted in on her. I really would like the recipe if you have it written down somewhere. Then there was the sound of chairs in the dining room, and the men strolled in. Evelyn saw at once that her worst fears were realised. Harold's face was flushed and his words ran together at the end of sentences, while Tom Lowry lurched when he walked and narrowly missed Irene's lap when he tried to sit on the couch beside her. He sat there, blinking dazedly in the company. Evelyn found herself blinking back at him, but she saw no humour in it. Joe Ambler was smiling contentedly and purring on his cigar. Only Aaron and Milton Piper seemed unaffected. It's a pretty fine town, Aaron, said Ambler. You'll find that. I found it, sir, said Aaron pleasantly. You'll find it more, Aaron, said You'll find it more, Aaron, said Harold, nodding emphatically, if I have anything to do with it. He soared into a eulogy of the city, and Evelyn wondered uncomfortably if it bored everyone as it bored her. Apparently not. They were all listening attentively. Evelyn broke in at the first gap. Where have you been living then, Mr. Aaron? She asked interestedly. And she remembered that Mrs. Aaron had told her, but it didn't matter. Harold mustn't talk so much. He was such an ass when he'd been drinking, but he plopped directly back at her. Tell you, Aaron, first you want to go a house up on the hill. Get Stern House or Ridgeway House. When I have some people say, there's Aaron House. Solid, you know. That's your fatty goose. Evelyn flushed. This didn't sound right at all. Still, Aaron didn't seem to notice anything amiss, only nodded gravely. Have you been looking? But her words trailed off unheard as Harold's voice spoke out. Yes, I start. And you get to know people. Snobbish town first was outside. Not long, not after, you know. People like you. He indicated Aaron and his wife in a sweeping gesture. All right, cordial as anything. Won't forget by barrier. He swallowed and then said barrier repeatedly. Repeated it masterfully. Evelyn looked appealingly at her brother-in-law, but before he could intercede, a thick mumble had come crowding out of Tom Lowry, hindered by the dead cigar which he gripped firmly with his teeth. What? Demanded Harold earnestly. Resignedly and with difficulty, Tom removed the cigar, as he removed parts of it, and then blew the remainder with a hut sound across the room, where it landed liquidly and limply in Miss Aaron's lap. Beg pardon, he mumbled, and rose with a vague intention of going after it. Mitten's hand and his coat collapsed him in time, and Miss Aaron, not ungracefully, flounced the tobacco from her skirt onto the floor, now once looking at it. I was saying, continued Tom thickly, before that happened, he waved his hand apologetically towards Miss Aaron, I was saying I heard truth at a country club matter. Milton leaned and whispered something to him. Let me alone, he said petulantly. No, I'm done. That's what I came for. Evelyn sat there in a panic, trying to make her mouth form words. She saw her sister's sardonic expression, and Miss Aaron's face turning vivid red. Aaron was looking down at his watch chain, fingering it. He's keep you out. He's not a bit better than you. I'll fix the whole damn thing up. But before then, no, Harold told you for bad thing. Milton Piper rose suddenly and awkwardly to his feet. In a second, everyone was standing tensely, and Milton was saying something very hurriedly about having to go early. And the Aarons were listening with eager intentness. Then Mrs. Aaron swallowed and turned with a forced smile towards Jessie. Evelyn saw Tom lurch forward and put his hand on Aaron's shoulder, and suddenly she was listening to a new anxious voice at her elbow, and turning found Hilda, the second maid. Please, Miss Piper, I think Julie got her hand poisoned. It's all swelled up and her cheeks is hot and she's moaning and groaning. Julia's? Evelyn asked sharply. The party suddenly receded. She turned quickly, sought with her eyes from Miss Aaron, slipped towards her. If you'll excuse me, miss, she had momentarily forgotten the name, but she went on. My little girl's been taken sick. I'll be down when I can. She turned and ran quickly up the stairs, retaining the confused pictures of raised cigar smoke and a loud discussion in the centre of the room that seemed to be developing into an argument. Switching on the light in the nursery, she found Julie tossing feverishly and giving out little cries. She put her hand against the cheek. They were burning. With an exclamation, she followed the arm down under the cover until she found the hand. Hilda were right. The old thumb was swollen to the wrist, and in the centre were a little inflamed sore. Blood poisoning. Her mum cried in terror. The bandage had come off the cut and she'd gotten something in it. She'd cut it at 3 o'clock. It was now nearly 11. 8 hours. Blood poisoning couldn't possibly develop so soon. She rushed to the phone. Dr. Martin across the street were out. Dr. Falk, their family physician, didn't answer. She racked her brains and in desperation called her throat specialist and bit her lip furiously while he looked up the numbers of 2 physicians. During that interminable moment she thought she heard loud voices downstairs, but she seemed to be in another world for now. After 15 minutes she located a physician who sounded angry and sulky at being called out of bed. She ran back to the nursery and, looking at the hand, found it was somewhat more swollen. "Oh God," she cried, and kneeling beside the bed began smoothing back Julie's hair over and over. With a vague idea of getting some hot water, she rose and started towards the door. But the lace of her dress caught in the bed rail and she fell forward on her hands and knees. She struggled up and jerked frantically at the lace. The bed moved and Julie groaned. Then, more quietly, but with sudden fumbling fingers, she found the pleat in the front, tore the old pannier completely off, and rushed out from the room. Out in the hall she heard a single, loud, insistent voice, but as she reached the end of the stairs it ceased and the outer door banged. The music room came into view. Only Harold and Milton were in there, the former leaning against the chair, his face very pale, his collar open and his mouth moving loosely. "What's the matter?" I looked at her anxiously. There was a little trouble, and Harold saw her and straightened up, and Arthur began to speak. "So my cousin Mark got that common nouveau riche shot my cousin. Tom had trouble with Aaron, and Harold interfered, said Milton. "My Lord Milton," cried Evelyn, "couldn't you have done something?" "I tried. Julie's sick," she interrupted him. "She's poisoned herself. Get him to bed if you can." Harold looked up. "Julie's sick." Paying no attention, Evelyn brushed by through the dining room, catching sight with a burst of horror of the big punch bowl still on the table, a liquid from melted ice in its bottom. She heard steps on the front stairs. It were Milton helped Harold up, and then a mumble, "Oh, Julie, all right." "Don't let him go into the nursery," she shouted. The hours blurred into a nightmare. The doctor arrived just before midnight and within half an hour had lanced the wound. He left at 2 after giving her the address of 2 nurses to call up and promising a return at 6:30. It was blood poisoning. At 4, leaving Hilda by the bedside, she went to her room and, slipping with a shudder out of her evening dress, kicked it into a corner. She put on a house dress and returned to the nursery while Hilda went to make coffee. Not until noon could she bring herself to look in Harold's room. When she did, it was to find him awake and staring very miserably at the ceiling. He turned bloodshot, hollow eyes upon her. For a minute she hated him, couldn't speak. An husky voice came from the bed. "What time is it?" "Noon." "I made a damn fool." "It doesn't matter," she said sharply. "Julie got blood poisoning. They may..." She choked over the words. "They may think she'll have to lose her hand." "What?" "She cut herself on that bowl." "Last night?" "Oh, what does that matter?" she cried. "She got blood poisoning. Can't you hear?" He looked at her, bewildered. He sat halfway up in bed. "I'll get dressed," he said. Her anger subsided, and a great wave of weariness and pity for him rolled over her. After all, it were his trouble tree. "Yes," she answered listlessly. "I suppose you'd better." That's the end of chapter 3. My lord, things go from bad to worse. Lordy lord. Well, that's what you get for not listening to your wife, I suppose. At least with the making a fool of himself thing. But the blood poisoning is a terrible thing. A terrible thing indeed. Don't think there's much else to say really, other than the fact that it's a terrible situation to be in when you're trying to deal with a problem and everyone else in the house is drunk or incapacitated in some way, surrounded by people who are obstacles rather than help. Yeah. Chapter 4. If Evelyn's beauty had hesitated in her early 30s, it came to an abrupt decision just afterwards, and completely left her. A tentative outlay of wrinkles in her face suddenly deepened, and flesh collected rapidly on her legs and hips and arms. Her mannerism of drawing her brows together had become an expression. They were habitual when she were reading or speaking, and even while she slept. She was 46. As in most families whose fortunes had gone down, rather than up, she and Harold had drifted into collarless antagonism. In response, they looked at each other with the toleration they might have felt for broken old chairs. Evelyn worried a little when he was sick and did her best to be cheerful under the weary and depression of living with a disappointed man. Family bridge were over for the evening and she'd sighed with relief. She had made more mistakes than usual this evening, and she didn't care. Irene shouldn't have made that remark about the infantry being particularly dangerous. There had been no letter for 3 weeks now, and while this were nothing out of the ordinary, it never failed to make her nervous. Naturally, she hadn't known how many clubs were out. Harold had gone upstairs, so she stepped out on the porch for a breath of fresh air. There was a bright glamour of the moonlight diffusing on the sidewalks and lawns, and with little half yawns, half laughs, she remembered one long moonlight affair of her youth. It was astonishing to think that life had once been the sum of her current love affairs, but now the sum of her current problems. There was the problem with Julie. Julie was 13, and lately she was growing more and more sensitive about her deformity, and preferred to stay away in her room reading. A few years before, she had been frightened at the idea of going to school, and Evelyn could not bring herself to send her. She would grow up in her mother's shadow, a pitiful little figure with the artificial hand she made no attempt to use, but kept forlornly in her pocket. Lately she had been taking lessons on using it, because Evelyn had feared she would cease to lift the arm altogether. After the lesson, unless she made a move with it in listless obedience to her mother, the little hand would creep back into the pocket of her dress. For a while her dresses were made without pockets, but Julie had moped around the house so miserably at a loss all 1 month that Evelyn weakened and now tried the experiment again. The problem with Donald had been different from the start. She had attempted vainly to keep him near her as she had tried to teach Julie to lean less on her. Lately, the problem with Donald had been snatched out of her hands. His division had been abroad for 3 months. She yawned again, laughed for a thing for youth. What an happy youth she must have had. She remembered her pony, Bijou, and the trip to Europe with her mother when she was 18. Very, very complicated, she said aloud and severely to the moon, and stepping inside were about to close the door when she heard a noise in the library and started. It was Martha, the middle-aged servant. There kept only one now. "I'm Martha," she said in surprise. Martha turned quickly. "Oh, I thought you was upstairs. Is anything the matter?" Martha hesitated. "No, she stood there visiting. It was a letter, Miss Pepper, that I put somewhere." "A letter? Your own letter?" asked Evelyn, switching on the lights. "No, it was to you. It was this afternoon, Miss Pepper, in the last mail. The postman gave it to me, and in the back doorbell rang. I had it in my hand, so I must have stuck it somewhere. I thought I'd just slip in and find it." "What sort of a letter? Mr. Donald?" "No, it was an advertisement, maybe, or a business letter. It was a long, narrow one, I remember." They began a search through the music room, looking on trays and mantelpieces, and then through the library, feeling on the top rows of books. Martha paused in despair. "I can't think where. I went straight to the kitchen. The dining room, maybe." He started hopefully for the dining room, but turned suddenly at the sound of a gasp behind her. Evelyn had sat down heavily in a Morris chair. Her brows drawn very close together, her eyes blinking furiously. "Are you sick?" For a minute there was no answer. Evelyn sat there very still, and Martha could see the very quick rise and fall of her bosom. "Are you sick?" she repeated. "No," said Evelyn slowly. "But I know where the letter is. Go away, Martha, I know." Wonderingly, Martha withdrew, and still Evelyn sat there, only the muscles round her eyes moving, contracting and relaxing and contracting again. She knew now where the letter was. She knew as well as if she had put it there herself, and she felt instinctively and unquestionably what the letter was. It was long and narrow like an advertisement, but up in the corner in large letters it said War Department, and in smaller letters below, Official Business. She knew it lay there in the big bowl with her name in ink on the outside, and her soul's death within. Rising unceremoniously, she walked towards the dining room, feeling her way along the bookcase and through the doorway. After a moment she found the light and switched it on. There with the bowl, reflecting the electric light and the crimson squared edges, the black and yellow squares edged with blue, ponderous and glittering, grotesquely and triumphantly ominous. She took a step forward and paused again. Another step and she would see over the top and in the inside. Another step and she would see an edge of white. Another step. Her hands fell on the rough, cold surface. In a moment she was tearing it open, fumbling with an obstinate fold, holding it before her while the typewritten page glared out and struck her. Then it fluttered like a bird to the floor. The house, that had seemed whirring, buzzing a moment since, was suddenly very quiet. A breath of air crept in through the open front door, carrying the noise of a passing nightmare. She heard faint sounds from upstairs, and then a grinding racket in the pipe behind the bookcase. Her husband turning off a water tap. And in that instant it was as if this were not, after all, Donald's hour, except insofar as he was a marker in the insidious contest that had gone on in sudden surges and long listless interludes between Evelyn and this cold, malignant thing of beauty, a gift of enmity from a man whose face she had long since forgotten. With his massive, brooding passivity it laid there in the centre of her house, as it had lain for years, thrown out the ice-like beam of 1,000 eyes, perverse, glittering, merging each into each, never aging, never changing. Evelyn sat down on the edge of the table and stared at it, fascinated. It seemed to be smiling now, a very cruel smile, as if to say, "You see, this time I didn't have to hurt you directly. I didn't bother. You know, it was I who took your son away. You know how cold I am, and how hard, and how beautiful, because once you were just as cold, and hard, and beautiful." The bowl seemed suddenly to turn itself over, and then distend and swell until it became a great canopy that glittered and trembled over the room, over the house. As the walls melted slowly into mist, Evelyn saw it was still moving out and far away from her, shutting off far horizons and suns and moons and stars, except zinty blots seen faintly through it. And under it walked all the people, and the light that came through them were refracted and twisted until shadow seemed light and light seemed shadow, until the old panorama of the world became changed and distorted under the twinkling heaven of the bowl. Then there come a far-away booming voice like a low, clear bell. It come from the centre of the bowl and down the great sides to the ground, and then bounced towards her eagerly. "You see, I am fate," it shouted, "and stronger than your puny plans. I am how things turn out, and I am different from your little dreams, and I am the flight of time and the end of beauty and unfulfilled desire. All the accidents and imperceptions and the little minutes that shape the crucial hours are mine. I am the exception that proves no rules, the limits of your control, the condiment in the dish of life." The booming sound stopped. The echoes rolled away over the wide land to the edge of the bowl, bounced the world up into the great sides and back to the centre, where they hummed for a moment and died. And the great walls began slowly to bear down upon her, growing smaller and smaller, coming closer and closer as if to crush her. And as she clenched her hands and waited for the swift bruise of the cold glass, the bowl gave a sudden wrench and turned over, and lay there on the sideboard, shining and inscrutable, reflected in 100 prisms, myriad many-coloured glints and gleams and crossings and interlacing of light. The cold wind blew in again through the front door, and with a desperate, frantic energy, Evelyn stretched both her arms around the bowl. She must be quick. She must be strong. She tightened her arms until they ached, tauting the thin strips of muscle under her soft flesh, and with a mighty effort raised it and held it. She felt the wind blow cold in her back, where her dress had come apart from the stain of her effort, and as she felt it, she turned towards it and staggered under the great weight out through the library and on towards the front door. She must be quick. She must be strong. The blood in her arms throbbed dully, and her knees kept giving way under her. The feel of the cool glass were good. Out the front door she tottered, and over the stone steps, and there, summoning every fibre of her soul and body for a last effort, swung herself half around. For a second, as she tried to loose her hold, her numb fingers clung to the rough surface, and in that second she slipped and, losing her balance, toppled forward with despairing cry, her arms still around the bowl, down. Over the way lights went on. Far down the block the crash were heard, and pedestrians rushed up wonderingly. Upstairs a tired man awoke from the edge of sleep, and a little girl whimpered in her haunted doze. And all over the moonlit sidewalk, around the still black form, hundreds of prisms and cubes and splinters of glass reflected the light in little gleams of blue and black, edged with yellow, and yellow, crimson edged with black. And that's the end of a cut glass bowl. Now, I'm not entirely sure, because I don't think it were ever said explicitly, but I'm fairly certain that letter she received were the official notice that her son had been killed. I've got to admit, for this were called the cut glass bowl, and everything that went wrong was attached to the cut glass bowl, I forgot almost immediately that that was a gift from a man she jilted when she got married. And it was an item with a curse, like it was literally a cursed item. He cursed her name as he promised to give it to her. And every little wrong that happened in her life, from the breaking up of things with her husband, through to, the poisoning that cost her daughter's hand, through to the drunkenness that cost her husband his business, through to the death of her son, and I think the death of herself, based on the fact that she fell full head first onto a big broken glass bowl, come from that bowl itself. God. Was that an actual cursed item? Like the ones we got down here? Okay, so I don't understand. What? I need, like, Lamb, I don't get. I need either a yes or no, or you need to explain it. No, you see, when I said that. Lamb. When I said you need to explain it, I was being flippant there. That wasn't an invitation for you to come and possess my body and actually tell the people. I get that you're excited about the function of it, but also you don't like to teach people magic, and I want you to remember that and consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, rather than taking the opportunity to show off how smart and clever and powerful you are, you should consider sticking to your principles and not taking my body over in an horrible puppety sort of way as an excuse to explain to the various people here how ill something focus works with all that, yeah. Just something to consider, you know. Okay, right, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate your restraint. Okay. I also appreciate the fact that those words in you, because I know you're not going to test them yet. Oh. Right. So, yeah, but all told, that we're I don't know how to think about that, really. I mean, it's a very miserable story, which is sort of showing to be a theme with the Fitzgeralds we've been reading. I mean, this one was just a list of miseries, though, whereas the other ones we read sort of started hopeful and then succumbed to misery. This one was just down and down and down and down. It's very unpleasant. But they are good. I mean, like, you can see why he's still relevant. That's a compelling story he told. Just not an happy one. Well, that was the longest of his, and it was the longest we got tonight, so hopefully the next one won't be so bad. I must say the title sounds a bit ominous. And then we're over to some Twain, and Twain's been good fun in my experience, so hopefully that'll be good. We're going to have a quick drink, wet my throat, and then we'll press on. Right. Okay. So yeah, moving right along to the lost decade. All sorts of people came into the offices of the News Weekly. Norris and Brown had all sorts of relations with them. Outside of office hours, he was one of the editors. During the work time, he was simply a curly-haired man who, a year before, had edited the Dartmouth Jack-o'-lantern, will now only do glad to take the undesirable assignment around the office from straightening out a legible copy by playing cool boy without the title. Or to playing cool boy without the title. We'd seen this visitor go in the editor's office, a pale, tall man of 40 with blonde, statuesque hair and a manner that was neither shy nor timid, nor otherworldly like a monk, but something of all three. The name of his card, Lewis Trimble, evoked some vague memory, but having nothing to start on, Orson did not puzzle over it, until a buzzer sounded on his desk, and previous experience warned him that Mr. Trimble was to be his first course at lunch. Mr. Trimble, Mr. Brown, said the source of all luncheon money. Orson, Mr. Trimble's been away on a long time. Well, he feels that it's a long time, almost 12 years. Some people would consider themselves lucky to have missed the last decade. And so, said Orson. I can't lunch today, continued his chief. Take him to Wesons or 21, or anywhere he'd like. Mr. Trimble feels there's lots of things he hasn't seen. Trimble demurred politely. Oh, I can get around. I know it, old boy. Nobody knew this place like you did once. And if Mr. Brown tries to explain the horseless carriages, just send him back here to me. And you'll be back yourself by 4, won't you? Orson got his hat. You've been away 10 years, he asked, while they went down the elevator. They've begun the Empire State Building, said Trimble. What does that add up to? About 1928. As the chief said, you've probably been lucky to miss a lot. As a feeler, he added, probably had more interesting things to look at. Can't say I have. There's the street, and the way Trimble's face tightened at the roar of traffic made Orson take one more guess. You've been out of civilization, in a sense. Words were spoken in such a measured way that Orson concluded this man wouldn't talk unless he wanted to, and simultaneously wondered if he could have possibly spent the 30s in prison or an insane asylum. This is the famous 21, he said. You think you'd rather eat somewhere else? Trimble paused, looking carefully at the brownstone house. I can remember when the name of 21 got to be famous, he said, at the same year as Moriarty's. And he continued almost apologetically. I thought we might walk up Fifth Avenue about 5 minutes and eat wherever we happen to be. Someplace with young people to look at. Orson gave him a quick glance and once again thought of bars and grey walls and bars. He wondered if his duties included introducing Mr. Trimble to complacent girls, Mr. Trimble didn't look as if that were in his mind. The dominant expression was absolute and deep-seated curiosity, and Orson attempted to connect with the name with Admiral Bird's Eye at the South Pole, or flowers lost in Brazilian jungles. He was, or he had been, quite a fella, that were obvious. But the only definite clue to his environment, and Orson's the clue that led nowhere, was countryman's obedient to the traffic lights and his predilection for walking on the side next to the shops and not the street. Once he stopped and gazed in one haberdasher's window. "Great times," he said. "I haven't seen one since I left for college." "Where'd you go?" "Massachusetts Tech. Great place. I'm going to take a look at it next week. Let's eat somewhere along here. They're in the upper 50s. You choose." "They're a good restaurant with a little awning just around the corner." "What do you want to see the most?" Orson asked as they sat down. Trimble considered. "Well, the back of people's heads," he suggested. "Their necks, how their heads are joined to their bodies. I'd like to hear what those two little girls are saying to their father. Not exactly what they're saying, whether the words float or submerge, how their mouths shut when they finish speaking. Just a matter of rhythm. Colt Porter came back to the States in 1928 because he thought there was new rhythms around." Orson was sure he had his clue now, and with nice delicacy did not pursue it by a millimetre, even suppressing a sudden desire to say there were a fine concert in Carnegie Hall tonight. "A weight of spoons," said Trimble. "So light, a little bowl with a stick attached." He cast in the waiter's eye. "I knew him once, but he wouldn't remember me." As they left the restaurant, the same waiter looked at Trimble rather puzzled, as if he almost knew him. When they were outside, Orson laughed. "After 10 years, people will forget." "Oh, I had dinner there last night," he broke off in an abrupt manner. "They're all kind of nutsy," Orson decided. He changed himself suddenly in regard. "For me, you can get a good candid focus on Rockefeller Center," he pointed out with spirit. "And the Chrysler Building, the Armistead Building, the Daddy, all the new ones." "The Armistead Building?" Trimble rubbernecked obediently. "Yes, I designed it." Orson shook his head cheerfully. "We used to go out with all kinds of people. That stuff about having been in the restaurant last May." He paused by the brass establisher in the cornerstone of the building. "Erected 1928, you said?" Trimble nodded. "I was taken drunk that year, every which way drunk, so I never saw it before now." "Ah," Orson hesitated. "Will I go in now?" "I've been in it lots of times. I've never seen it. And now it isn't what I want to see. I wouldn't ever be able to see it now. I simply want to see how people walk, and what their clothes and shoes and hats are made of, and their eyes and hands. Would you mind shaking hands with me?" "Oh, sir." Thanks. That's very kind. I suppose it looks strange, but people will think we're saying goodbye. I'm going to walk up the avenues for a while, so we will say goodbye. Tell your office I'll be in at 4. Orson looked after him. When he started out, half was certain he'd turn into a bar. There was nothing about him that suggested or ever had suggested drink. Jesus, he said to himself, drunk for 10 years. He felt suddenly the texture of his own coat, and then he reached out and pressed his thumb against the granite of the building by his side. And that's the end. I don't really know what to make of that. That's quite an odd one, really. There's not a lot to it. He's a very strange man who's been introduced. And given that he designed a specific building that's named, I suppose he might be a real figure, maybe. But, aside from the fact that he's apparently been drunk for 10 years, there doesn't seem to be a lot to him. He's not particularly interesting. I don't know if that one's worth the read. I don't know if it's really worth being its own little book. But I don't know. It were odd. It were odd indeed. Can't say I thought too much of it, but something to get your teeth around. At least it wasn't so miserable, eh? Anyhow, let's be moving on to the Twain, shall we? Now what we start with is the celebrated jumping frog at Calaveras County. It seems an odd name for a story, because as far as I'm aware, most frogs is known to jump, but maybe this one's particularly good at it. We'll find out. And this sort of little run of them seems to have a little data about them first. So, first published as Gene Smithy and His Jumping Frog in New York's Saturday Press, November 18, 1865. His story won instant acclaim. It later became the title of Twain's first book, The Celebrated Jumping Frog at Calaveras County and Other Sketches, published by C.H. Webb, New York in 1867. In compliance with the request of a friend of mine who wrote me from the east, I called on a good-natured, garrulous old Simon Wheeler and inquired after my friend's friend, Leonidas W. Smiley, as requested to do, and hereunto appended the result. I have a lurking suspicion that Leonidas W. Smiley is a myth. My friend never knew such a personage, and he only conjectured that if I asked old Wheeler about him, it would remind him of his infamous Jim Smiley, who would go to work and bore me to death with some exasperating reminiscence of him, long and as tedious as it should be useless to me. If that was his design, it succeeded. I found Simon Wheeler dozing comfortably by the bathroom stove at a dilapidated tavern in the decayed mining camp of Angels, and I noticed that he was fat and bald-headed, had no expression of winning gentleness and simplicity upon his tranquil countenance. He rose up and gave me a good day. I told him a friend of mine had commissioned me to make some inquiries about a cherished companion of his boyhood named Leonidas W. Smiley, Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, a young minister of the gospel, whom he had heard was at one time a resident of Angels Camp. He added that if Mr. Wheeler could tell me anything about the Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, I feel under many obligations to him. Simon Wheeler backed me into a corner and blockaded me there with his chair, and sat down and reeled off the monotonous narrative which follows this paragraph. He never smiled, never frowned, he never changed his voice from the gentle flow and key at which he turned his initial sentence. He never betrayed the slightest suspicion of enthusiasm, but all through the interminable narrative there ran a vein of impressive earnestness and sincerity, which showed me plainly that so far from his imagining there were anything ridiculous or funny about his story, he regarded it as a really important matter, and admired its two heroes as men of transcendent genius in finesse. I let him go on in his own way, and never interrupted him once. Reverend Leonidas W.H. and Reverend there were a fella here once by the name of Jim Smiley. In the winter of 49, or maybe it was the spring of 50, I don't recollect exactly somehow. Or what makes me think it was one or the other is because I remember the big flume wasn't finished when he first come to the camp. But anyway, he was the curiousest man always bet on anything that turned up you'd see. You'd ever see if he could get anybody bet on the other side. And if he couldn't, he changed sides. Any way that suited the other man would suit him. Anyway, just so long as he got a bet, he was satisfied. But still, he were lucky, uncommonly lucky. Must always come out a winner. He were always ready and laying for a chance. There couldn't be no solitary thing mentioned, but the fellow had offered a bet on him. Take any side you please. As I was just telling you, if there were a horse race, you find him flush, or you find him run busted at the end of it. If there were a dog fight, he'd bet on it. If there were a cat fight, he'd bet on it. If there were a chicken fight, he'd bet on it. Or if there were two birds set on the fence, he would bet you which one would fly away first. Or if there were a camp meeting, he would be there regular to bet on Parson Walker, which he judged to be the best exhorter about here, and so he was too, and a good man. If he ever see a stragglebug starting to go anywhere, he would bet you how long it would take him to get to wherever he would go in there. And if you took him up, he would follow the stragglebug to Mexico, but what he would find out where it was bound for, and how long we were on the road. Lots of boys here seen that Smiley and could tell you about him. Well, it never made no difference to him, he'd bet on anything. Dangest fella. Parson, Walker's wife, lay very sick once for a good while, and it seemed as if the warm were going to save her. One morning he come in, and Smiley up and asked him how she was, and he said she was considerable better, thank the Lord for his infinite mercy, and coming on so smart and with the blessing of Providence she'd get well yet. And Smiley, before he thought, says, well, I risk 2.5 she done anyway. It's just Smiley had a mare. The boys called her the 15-minute hang. That were only in fun, you know, because of course she was faster than that. And he used to win money on that horse, for all she was so slow and always had the asthma or the distemper or the consumption or something of that kind. He used to give her 200-300 yards start and then pass her underway. But always at the flag end of the race she'd get excited and desperate like, and come cavorting and straddling up, and scattering her legs around limber, sometimes in the air, sometimes out to the onside among the fences, and kicking up more dust and raising more racket without coughing and sneezing and blowing her nose, and always fetch up at the stand just about a neck and head, as near as she could decipher it down. And a little small bald pup that he took round him, you'd think it wasn't worth a cent, but he set it round to look ornery and lay for a chance to steal something. But as soon as money were up on him, he were a different dog. His underjaw began to stick out like a forecastle out of a steamboat, and his teeth would uncover and shine like the furnace. Any dog might tackle him bully-ragging, he'd bite him and throw him out over his shoulder 2-3 times. And Andrew Jackson, which is the name of the pup, Andrew Jackson would never let on, but he was satisfied. And he hadn't expected nothing else, and the bets being doubled on the other side all the time, till the money were all up. Then all of a sudden he would grab the other dog, just by the chin of his hard leg, and freeze it, not to char, you understand, but only just to grip and hang on till they froze up the sponge. But we're a year. Smiley always come out winner of that pup, till he harnessed a dog once that didn't have no hind leg, because they'd been sawed off with a circular saw. When the thing had gone far enough and the money were all up, and he'd come and make the snatcher his pet hold, he'd seen in a minute how it'd be imposed on. And how the other dog had him in the door, so to speak, and he appeared surprised, and then he looked sort of discouraged like, and didn't try no more to win the fight, so he got shocked out bad. He gave Smiley a look, as much to say as his heart was broke, and it wasn't his fault for putting up a dog that had no hind legs for him to take hold of. which was a main independence in a fight. Then he limped off a piece and laid down and died. For a good pop like Andrew Jackson would have made him a name for himself if he lived, but the stuff was in him, he had genius. I know it, because he had no opportunities to speak of. It don't stand no reason that a dog could make such a fight as he could under them circumstances if he hadn't no talent. It always makes me feel sorry when I think of his last fight and of his, the way it turned out. Just going to pause here. This is probably very hard to listen to, and in my defence it's equally hard to read. This is all run, like these are page-long paragraphs and they're all running into one another. And so I'm trying to give it the character it deserves. But this is sort of a nightmare to read, so do bear with me. Well, this year Smiley had rat terriers and chicken cocks and tomcats and all them kinds of things that you couldn't rest and you couldn't let nothing on him for bet on, but you had you matched. He kissed a frog one day and took him home and said he calculated to educate him, and so he'd never done nothing for 3 months but sat in his backyard and letting that frog to jump. And you bet he did learn him too. He gave him a little punch behind the next minute you'd see the frog whirring in the air like a donut. See him turn on one somerset, or maybe a couple, if he got a good start, and come down flat-footed and all right like a cat. He got up so in the matter of fetching flies and kept them in practice so constantly he'd nail a fly every time for as he could see him. Smiley said all frog wanted was education, he could do most anything. I believe him. Well, I seen him set Daniel Webster down here on the floor, Daniel Webster with the name of the frog, and sing out, "Flies, Daniel, flies," and quicker than you could wink, he'd spring right off and snack a fly off the counter there, or flop down the floor again as solid as a gob of mud, before scratching the side of his head with his arm foot, as indifferent as if he had no idea he'd been doing any more than a frog might do. You never seen a frog somewhat as straightforward as he was, for all he was so gifted. When it come to fair and square jumping on a dead level, he could get over more ground in one stroke than any animal of his breed you ever seen. Jumping on a dead level were his strong suit, you understand. When it come on that, Smiley would ante up any money on him so long as he had a red. Smiley was monstrous proud of his frog, and well he might be, for fellas that had travelled and been everywhere else said he'd laid over any frog that ever they see. When Smiley kept the beast in a little lattice box, he used to fetch him down sometimes and lay for a bet. One day a fella, a stranger at Canby once, come across him with a box and he says, "And what might be in that box you got?" And Smiley says, sort of indifferent like, "Might be a parrot and might be a canary maybe, but ain't, it's only just a frog." And the fella took it and looked at it careful and turned it round this way and that and says, "So it is. What's he good for?" "Well," Smiley says, "he's in kills. He's good enough for one thing, I should judge. He can outjump any frog in Calaveras County." The fella took the box again and took another long particular look and gave back the smile and says very deliberately, "Where?" he says, "I don't see no pints about that frog that's any better than another frog." "Maybe you don't," Smiley says. "Maybe you understand and frogs, and maybe you don't understand them. Maybe you have experience, and maybe you ain't only an amateur, as it were. Anyway, I've got my opinion, and I'll risk $40 that you can outjump any frog in Calaveras County." And the fella studied a minute, and then says, kind of like, "Well, I'm only a stranger here. I ain't got no frog. If I had a frog, I'd bet you." And Smiley says, "Well, that's all right. If you hold my box a minute, I'll go get you a frog." So the fella took the box and put up his $40 along with Smiley's and sat down away. So he sat there a good while, thinking to himself. Then he got the frog out and prized his mouth open and took a teaspoon and filled him full of quail shot, filled him pretty near up to his chin, and set him on the floor. Smiley went to the swamp and swapped around in the mud for a long time, and finally he catched a frog, and fetched him in and gave him this fella, and he says, "Now if you're ready, set him alongside of Daniel, with his 4 paws just even with Daniel's, and I'll get a word." And he says, "1, 2, 3, go!" And him and the fella touched the frogs from behind, and the new frog up looked lively, but Daniel gave a heave, and hoisted his shoulders up, so, like a Frenchman, that it wasn't no use, he couldn't budge. He was planted as solid as a church, he couldn't no more stir than he were anchored out. Smiley were a good deal surprised, he was disgusted too, but he didn't have no idea what the matter were, of course. The fella took the money and started away, and when we were going to the door, he sort of jerked his thumb over his shoulder, so Daniel and said very deliberate, "Well," he says, "I don't see no pints about the frogs any better than any other frog." Smiley had stood scratching his head and looking down at Daniel a long time. At last he says, "I do wonder what in the notion that frog could throw it off for. Wonder if there ain't something the matter with him. He appears to look mighty baggy somehow." He catched Daniel by the nape of the neck and he hefted him and turned him upside down and he belched out a double handful of shot. And then he sees how it was, and with the maddest man, he set the frog down and took off out of that fella, but he never catched him, and here Silent Wheeler heard his name called from the front yard and got out to see what we wanted. And turning to me as he moved away, he said, "Just set where you are, stranger, and rest easy, I ain't going to be gone a second." But by your leave, I did not think that, and continuation of the history of the enterprising vagabond Jim Smiley would be likely to afford me much information concerning Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, so I started away. At the door I met the societal Wheeler returning, and he buttonholed me and recommenced. "Well, this year Smiley had a yellow one-eyed cow that didn't have no tail, only just a short stump like a banana, and, however lacking both time and inclination, I did not wait to hear about the afflicted cow, but took my leave." Whew. Well, I'm a little bit torn on that one. I think we got through it pretty quick because the way I was reading it. Which, you know, ups and downs to that. I didn't particularly enjoy reading it because of the way it had to come out. But at the same time, I don't think I could have read that any other way. But to give you an example, I'm just going to go back briefly and we're going to look at one of the pages that I'm just going to take the start of a random paragraph and go from there. I'm going to try and read it slow and deliberate like, and you'll see why I don't think it would have worked. With Ischius Smiley had rat terriers and chicken cocks and tomcats and all them kind of things. That you couldn't rest and you couldn't fetch nothing for him to bet on, but he'd match you. He catched a frog one day and took him home and said he'd calculated to educate him, and so he never done nothing for 3 months but sat in his backyard and learned the frog to jump, and you bet he did learn him too. He'd give him a little punch behind, and the next minute you'd see that frog whirl in the air like a donut, see him turn one somerset, or maybe a couple if he got a good start, and come down flat-footed all right like a cat. Maybe I could have done it like that, but it feels very stilted and weird to be reading like that, with the diction that's sort of written in the book. I didn't enjoy the way it were written, I'll say that. I didn't like reading it like that, but I can see why it were written like that. It's like the account of being cornered by an old man who's too eager to tell you a story. And it's a shame though, because it's an interesting, well, it's a fun story. You know, there is this man who will bet on anything and has all these strange animals. It genuinely seems quite interesting, but the problem is the sort of point of the story is that it is told by a boring old man who you don't want to listen to. And that's sort of the joke of the piece, which means that it's quite annoying to read. At least read out loud. Maybe it's easier if you're reading in your head, but sort of spoils it for me. It's a shame. Still, I don't think we're a bad story all told. Just glad it's over, I'll say that, shall we? So, what are we about next? The Journals of Germany. Yeah. Right. The Journals of Germany. This short story originated as an appendix in Twain's Tramp Abroad, published by the American Publishing Company of Hartford, Connecticut in 1880. The daily journals of Hamburg, Frankfurt, Baden, Munich and Augsburg are all constructed on the same general plan. I speak of these because I'm more familiar with them than with any other German papers. They contain no editorials, whatever, no no personals, and this is rather a merit than a demerit perhaps. No funny paragraph column, no police court reports, no reports of proceedings of higher courts, no information about prize fights or other dog fights, horse races, walking matches, yachting contests, rifle matches, or other sporting matters of any sort. No reports of banquet speeches, no department of curious odds and ends of floating fact and gossip, no rumours about anything or anybody, no list of patents granted or sought, or any reference to such things, no abuse of public officials, big or little, complaints against them or praises of them, no religious columns Saturdays, no rehash of cold sermons Mondays, no weather indications, no local items unveiling all what is to happen in town, nothing of a local nature. Indeed, is mentioned beyond the movements of some prince or the proposed meeting of some deliberative body. After so formidable a list of what one can't find in a German daily, the question may well be asked, what can be found in it? It is easily answered. A child's handful of telegrams, mainly about European national and international political movements, letter correspondence about the same things, market reports, and there you have it. That is what a German daily is made of. A German daily is the slowest and saddest and dreariest in the inventions of man. Our own dailies infuriate the reader pretty often. The German dailies only stupefy. Daily only stupefies them. Once a week, the German daily of the highest class lightens up its heavy columns, that is, it thinks it lightens them up, with a profound and abysmal book criticism. A criticism that carries you down into the scientific bounds of the subject. The German critic is nothing if not scientific. When you come up at last and scent the fresh air and see the bonny daylight once more, you resolve without a dissenting voice that a book criticism is mistaken way to lighten up a German daily. Sometimes, in place of the criticism, the first-class daily gives you what it thinks is the gay and chipper essay about ancient Grecian funeral customs, or the ancient Egyptian method of tartering a mummy, or the reason for believing that some of the people who existed before the flood did not approve of cats. These are not unpleasant subjects, they are not uninteresting subjects, they are even exciting subjects, until one of these massive scientists gets hold of them. He soon convinces you that even these matters can be handled in such a way as to make a person low-spirited. As I have said, the average German daily is made up solely of correspondence, a trifle of it by telegram, the rest of it by mail. Every paragraph has the side head, London, Vienna, or some other town and a date, and always before the name of the town is placed a letter or a sign to indicate who the correspondent is, so that the authorities can find him when they want to hang him up. Star crosses, triangles, squares, half moons, suns, such are some of the signs used by correspondents. Some of the dailies move too fast, others too slowly. For instance, my Heidelberg daily were always 24 hours old when it arrived at the hotel. One of my Munich evening papers used to come a full 24 hours before it would do. Some of the less important dailies give one a tablespoonful of continued story every day. It is strung across the bottom of the page in the French fashion. By subscribing for the paper for 5 years, I judge a man might succeed in getting pretty much all of the story. If you ask a citizen of Munich which is the best Munich daily journal, he will always tell you that there is only one good Munich daily, and that is published in Augsburg, 40 or 50 miles away. It's like saying the best daily paper in New York is published out in New Jersey somewhere. Yes, the Augsburg Allgemeine Zeitung is the best Munich paper, and it is the one that I had in my mind when I was describing the first-class German daily above. The entire paper, opened out, is not quite as large as a single page of the New York Herald. It's printed on both sides, of course, in such large type that its entire contents could be put in the Herald type upon a single page of the Herald, and there would still be room enough on the page for the Zeitenberg supplement and some portions of the Zeitenberg next day's contents. Such is the first-class daily. The dailies actually printed in Munich are all called second-class by the public. If you ask which is the best of these second-class papers, they say there is no difference. One is as good as another. I have preserved a copy of one of them. It is called the Münchener Tagesanzeiger and bears the date January 25th, 1879. Comparisons are odious, but they need not be malicious, and without any malice I wish to compare this journal, published in a German city of 170,000 inhabitants, with journals of other countries. I know of no other way to enable the reader to size the thing. A column of an average daily paper in America contains from 1,800 to 2,500 words. The reading matter in a single issue consists of from 25,000 to 50,000 words. The reading matter in a copy of the Munich Journal consists of a total of 1,654 words, for I counted them. That would be nearly a column of one of our dailies. A single issue is the bulkiest daily newspaper in the world, the London Times, often contains 100,000 words of reading matter. Considering that the Daily Anzeiger issues the usual 26 number per month, the reading matter is a single number of the London Times would keep it in copy for 2 months and a half. The Anzeiger is an 8-page paper. Its page is 1 inch wider and 1 inch longer than a foolscap page. That is to say, the dimensions of its pages are somewhat between those of a schoolboy's slate and a lady's pocket handkerchief. 1/4 of the first page is taken up with the heading of the journal. This gives it a rather top-heavy appearance. The rest of the first page is reading matter. All of the second page is reading matter. The other 6 pages are devoted to advertisements. The reading matter is compressed into 205 small Parker lines and is lighted up with 8 Parker headlines. The bill of fare is as follows. First, under a Parker headline, with forced attention and respect, is a 4-line sermon urging mankind to remember that, although they are pilgrims here below, they are yet heirs to heaven, and that, when they depart from earth, they soar to heaven. Perhaps a 4-line sermon in a Saturday paper is the sufficient German equivalent to the 8 or 10 columns of sermons which the New Yorkers get in their Monday morning papers. The latest news, 2 days old, follows the 4-line sermon under the Parker headline, Telegrams. These are telegraphed with a pair of scissors out of the Augsburger Zeitung of the day before. These telegrams consist of 14 2/3 lines from Berlin, 15 lines from Vienna, and 2 5/8 lines from Calcutta. 33 small Parker lines of telegraph news in a daily journal in King's capital of 170,000 inhabitants is surely not an overdose. Next we have the Parker heading News of the Day, under which the following facts are set forth. Prince Leopold is going on a visit to Vienna, 6 lines. Prince Arnold is coming back from Russia, 2 lines. The Landtag will meet at 10 o'clock in the morning and consider an election law, 3 lines and 1 word over. A city government item, 5 and 1.5 lines. Prices of tickets to the proposed grand charity ball, 23 lines. But this one item occupies almost 1/4 of the entire first page. There is to be a wonderful Wagner concert in Frankfurt on the Main, with an orchestra of 108 instruments, 7 1/2 lines. That concludes the first page. 85 lines altogether on that page, including the 3 headlines. About 50 of those lines, as one perceives, deal with local matters, so the reporters are not overworked. Exactly 1/2 of the second page is occupied with opera criticism, 53 lines, 3 of them being headlines, and death notices, 10 lines. The other half of the second page is made up of 2 paragraphs under the head of Miscellaneous News. One of these paragraphs tells about a quarrel between the Tsar of Russia and his eldest son, 21.5 lines. And the other tells about an atrocious destruction of a present child by its parents, 40 lines, or 1/5 the total of the reading matter contained in the paper. Consider what a 5th part of the reading matter of an American daily paper issued in a city of 170,000 inhabitants amounts to. Think of what this mass is. Would anyone suppose I could so snugly tuck away such a mass in a chapter of this book that it would be difficult to find it again if the reader stopped its place? Surely not. I will translate that child murder word for word to give the reader a realising sense of what a 5th part of the reading matter of Munich Daily actually is when it comes under measurement of the eye. From Elbergskulg, January 21st, the Donau Zeitung received a long account of a crime where we shorten as follows. In Raumak, a village near Eppenschlag, lived a young married couple with 2 children, one of which, a boy aged 5, was born 3 years before their marriage. For this reason, and also because his relative at Eaglesback had bequeathed M400, $100 to the boy, the heartless father considered him in the way, so the unnatural parents determined to sacrifice him in the cruelest possible manner. They proceeded to starve him slowly to death, meantime frightfully maltreating him, as the village people now make known. It's too late. The boy was shut up in a hole, and when people passed, he cried and implored them to give him bread. His long-continued tortures and deprivations destroyed him at last on the 3rd of January. The sudden, sick death of the child created suspicion, and more so as the body was immediately clothed and laid upon the bed. Therefore, the coroner gave notice, and the inquest was held on the 6th. But a pitiable spectacle was disclosed then. The body was a complete skeleton, the stomach and intestines were utterly empty, they contained nothing whatever. The flesh in the colp were not as thick as the back of a knife, and incisions in it brought not a drop of blood. There was not a piece of sound skin, the size of $1 on the whole body. Wounds, scars, bruises, discolored, excavated blood, everywhere, even in the soles of the feet there were wounds. The cruel parents asserted that the boy had been so bad they had been obliged to use severe punishment, and that he finally fell over the bench and broke his neck. However, they were arrested 2 weeks after the inquest and put into the prison at Degdorf. Yes, they were arrested 2 weeks after the inquest. What an home sound that has. The kind of police briskness rather more reminds me of my native land than German journalism does. I think a German daily journal doesn't do any good to speak of, but at the same time it doesn't do any harm. It has a very large merit, and should not be lightly weighed nor lightly thought of. The German humorous papers are beautifully printed upon farm paper, and the illustrations are finely drawn, finely engraved, and are not that really funny, but deliciously so. So also, generally speaking, are the 2 or 3 terse sentences which accompany the pictures. I remember one of these pictures. A most dilapidated tramp is ruefully contemplating some coins which lie in his open palms. He says, "Well, begging is getting played out. Only about 5 marks, $1.25 for the old day. Many an official makes more." And I call to mind a picture of a commercial traveller who was about to unroll his samples. Merchant, pettishly, "No, don't. I don't want to buy anything." Drummer, "If you please, I was only going to show you." Merchant, "But I don't wish to see them." Drummer, after a pause, pleadingly, "Well, do you mind letting me look at them? I haven't seen them for 3 weeks. That's the end of the journals of Germany. That's an odd one there. I think that's sort of a piece at a time, really. The idea of a single paper that you'd read in a day being 25 to 50,000 words seems a bit much now, especially 100,000 words, which was London Times, wasn't it? I mean, 50,000 words is about the short end of a novel, really. So, your daily news, in theory, would then be a whole novel. This explains why people in old-fashioned stories are so often reading the paper. But the idea of a bulletin like the German one sounds much more reasonable to me nowadays, but then I suppose we're used to getting our news in quicker segments, aren't we? Never mind 1,800 words, you get 140 characters on Twitter, or whatever it is. I don't know. I think it's also kind of unfortunate, the example story with the account of a boy being cruelly abused and murdered, because it sort of brings the old tone down as well. Doesn't really work super well with Mark Twain's sort of light and funny general character, especially as it's followed by him describing a couple of funny papers, which aren't really that funny. Don't hold up so well. It's a shame, because I think the technical detail is interesting, like his breakdown of how much or how many words go into a given column and how many go into a given edition, the description of the layout. Like, I mean, it's not particularly compelling, but it's interesting in like a technical sense, and like historically, it tells you what sort of people were reading, both in America and in Germany at the time, and the sort of news it gets covered. But it's just kind of dull, and then you bring it down with the horrible story, and then you bring it down again with the sort of anticlimactic in it. I don't know. Not his best work. It's a shame because I do think it's very worth reading for that information alone. Been a bit of a letdown today, the Twains. In fact, even the second Fitzgerald story was sort of a letdown. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was weird. We only had the cut glass bowl to go off of. Which again, I mean, that's fitting, I suppose. You have a very good story about how a bowl brings everything bad, and then everything since the bowl has been bad. Still, we got one more to go. Let me have a quick drink. And we'll get on to about Barbers. Probably going to be a short one overall today, but it is what it is. Right. About Barbers. As he did with many of his other work, Twain first introduced this story in his Galaxy columns. 4 years later, in 1875, it was published in Sketches New and Old by the American Publishing Company of Hartford, Connecticut. All things change except Barbers, the ways of Barbers and the surroundings of Barbers. These never change. What one experiences in a barber's shop the first time he enters, one is what he will always experience in barber shops, afterward to the end of his days. I got shaved this morning, as usual. A man approached the door from Jones Street, and as I approached it from Main, I think it always happens. I hurried up, but there was of course no use. He entered the door one little step ahead of me. I followed him on his heels and saw him take the only vacant chair, the one presided over by the best barber. It always happens so. I sat down, hoping that I might fall out of the chair belonging to the better of the remaining two barbers, for he had already begun combing his man's hair, when his comrade were not quite done rubbing up an oil in his customer's locks. I watched the probabilities with strong interest. When I saw that number 2 were gaining on number 1, my interest grew to solicitude. When number 1 stopped a moment to make change or barter a ticket for a newcomer and lost ground in the race, my solicitude rose to anxiety. When number 1 caught up again, both he and his comrade were pulling the towels away and brushing the powder from their customers' cheeks. They were about an even thing which would say it next first. My breath stood still with suspense, but when at the culminating moments number 1 stopped the passer comb a couple of times to his customer's eyebrows, I saw that he had lost the race by a single instant, and I rose indignant and quitted the shop to keep from falling into the hands of number 2. There was none of that enviable firmness that enables a man to look calmly in the eyes of a waiting barber and tell him he will wait for his fellow barber's chat. I stayed out 15 minutes and then went back, hoping for better luck. Of course, all the chairs were occupied now, and 4 men sat waiting silently, unsociable, distraught, and looking bored, as men always do who are waiting their turn in any barber shop. I sat down in one of the iron-armed compartments of an old sofa and put in the time for a while reading the framed advertisements of all sorts of quack nostrums for dye and colour in the air. Then I read the greasy names on the private bay rum bottles, read the names and noted the numbers on the private shaving cups and the pigeonholes, studied the stained and damaged cheap prints on the walls of battles, early presidents and voluptuous recumbent sultanas, and the tiresome and everlasting young girls putting a grandfather's spectacle on. Excruciated my heart in cheerful canary and the distracting parrot that the few barber shops are without. Finally, I searched out the least dilapidated of the last year's illustrated papers that littered the foul centre table and conned their injustifiable misrepresentations of old forgotten events. At last my turn came. A voice said next, and I surrendered to number 2, of course. It always happened so. I said meekly that I was in a hurry, and if it affected him as strongly as he had never heard it. He shoved up my head and put a napkin under it. He ploughed his fingers into my collar and fixed a towel there. He explored my hair with his claws and suggested it needed trimming. I said I did not want it trimmed. He explored again and said it was pretty long for the present style. Better have a little taken off. He needed it behind especially. I said I had it cut only a week before. He yearned over it reflectively a moment, then asked with a disparaging manner who cut it. I came back with him promptly with that you did. I had him there. Then he fell to stirring up his lather and regarding himself in the glass, stopping now and then to get close and examine his chin critically or inspect a pimple that he lathered. Or inspect a pimple. Then he lathered one side of my face thoroughly, and we're about to lather the other when a dog fight attracted his attention, and he ran to the window and stayed, stopped, and saw it out, losing 2 shillings on the result in bets with other barbers. A thing which gave me great satisfaction. He finished lathering and then began to rub the inner sides with his hand. He now began to sharpen his razor and an old suspender, and were delayed a good deal on account of a controversy about cheap masquerade ball he had figured out the night before in red cambric and bogus ermine of some kind of king. He was so gratified with being chaffed about some damsel whom he had smitten with his charms that he used every means to continue the controversy by pretending to be annoyed at the chaffing of his fellows. This matter got more surveying of himself in the glass, and he put down his razor and brushed his hair with elaborate care, plastering an inverted arch of it down on his forehead, accompanying a cute part behind, and brushing the two wings forward over his ears with nice exactness. In the meantime, the lather was drying on my face and apparently eating into my vitals. Now I began to shave, digging his fingers into my countenance to stretch the skin, and bundling and tumbling away at my head this way and that as convenience in shaving and demanded. As long as he was on the tough sides of my face, I did not suffer, but when he began to rake and rip and tug at my chin, the tears come. Now I made an handle of my nose to assist him in shaving the corners of my upper lip, and it was by this bit of circumstantial evidence that I discovered that part of his duties in the shop were to clean the kerosene lamps. I had often wondered, in an indolent way, whether the barbers did that or whether it the boss. About this time, I was amusing myself trying to guess where he would be most likely to cut me this time. He got ahead of me and sliced me in the end of the chin before I got my mind made up. He immediately sharpened his razor. He might have done it before. I do not like a close shave and would not let him go over me a second time. I tried to get him to put up his razor, dreading that he would make for the side of my chin and my tender spot, a place where razors cannot touch twice without making trouble. He said he only wanted to just smooth off one little roughness, and in the same moment he slipped his razor along the forbidden ground, and the dreaded pimple signs of a close shave rose up smart and answered the call. Now I soaked his towel in bay rum and slapped it all over my face nastily, lapped it over as if a human being had ever yet washed his face in that way. Then he dried it by slapping with the dry part of the towel as if a human being had ever dried his face in such a fashion. But a barber seldom rubs you like a Christian. Next he poked bay rum into the cut place with his towel, then choked the wound with powdered starch and soaked it forevermore. No doubt, if I had not rebelled and begged off, he powdered my whole face now, straightened me up and began to plough my hair through fully with his hands. Then he suggested a shampoo and said my hair needed it badly, very badly. I observed that I shampooed it myself very thoroughly in the bath yesterday. I had him again. His next recommended some of Smith's Air Glorifier and offered to sell me a bottle. I declined. He praised the new perfume, Jones Delight of the Toilet, and proposed to sell me some of that. I declined again. He tendered me a toothbrush atrocity of his own invention, and when I declined, offered to trade knives with me. He returned the business after this miscarriage of this last enterprise, sprinkled me over, legs and all, greased my hair in defiance of my protest against it, rubbed and scrubbed a good deal of it out by the roots, and combed and brushed the rest, parting it behind and plastering the eternal inverted arch of hair down on my forehead. And then, while combing my scant eyebrows and defiling them with pomade, strung out on account of the achievements of a 6-ounce black and tan terrier of his till I heard the whistle blow for noon and knew I was 5 minutes late for the train. Then he snatched away the towel, brushed lightly about my face, brushed his comb through my eyebrows, and once more gaily sang out, "Next." This barber fell down and died of apoplexy 2 hours later. I am waiting over a day for my revenge. I am going to attend his funeral. That one was just alright. Which is sort of the most disappointing thing of all. I really liked the first Twain we had, and I even quite liked the second one we had yesterday. But that one, I mean, it had its sort of tone, its tenor, and it had the sort of run on of it, but it's quite a boring story. And it's so sort of mean-spirited that it sort of brings the whole thing down to the point where it is just fun. Not particularly compelling, not particularly, like, nothing wrong with it, it's fine, but yeah, disappointing to end on. At least if it had been bad, you know, it would have been something that like, ooh, we're going off on something, but no, that's just, yeah, it was alright. Disappointing. We had a really strong start today, and then we sort of farted about the rest of it, and we're ending pretty early because I didn't have enough to do. That's a shame. Oh well. Hopefully the new wards is working well and we can see what's going on. We'll see a slight improvement in things. Or if not, well, not my business I suppose. But yeah. As always, thank you anyone who's turned up to watch this. And anyone who's watching this later, I do appreciate it. I always like to feel like I'm doing something with a purpose. But yeah, I've got not much else to say really about that. There's not much to comment on, so I think I'll just say ta-ra for now. I hope you have a lovely evening.